Oh, I was house hacking before house hacking was cool. Well, the ironic part about buying my own home and that it wasn't me thinking that this was like the best path forward, but I had money saved up and I was ready to rent an apartment. And so my mom, I love her, she said, well, you have savings, so why don't you buy a home? And I said, what? How do you do that? She found me a home. So these condos were being refurbished and they were really good price. So my mom said, why don't you give it a try? And because they were kind of like a new build, I was able to go get a mortgage. Now, obviously, I needed a cosigner because, I was 21 and I had a bit of credit. I had savings, but at that time I was waitressing. So on paper, I just wasn't making the money that would qualify for a mortgage. So my stepdad and my mom came in and saved the day and allowed me to buy my very first home. And I got the bug. Well, it made sense at that point, right? And right away, the whole plan was that I was gonna rent out the rooms because I had a 3-bedroom. I got the N unit, beautiful space. I loved it so much. It was a 2-level condo townhouse, one of those terrace homes. I loved it. But I rented out the rooms and that was what basically allowed me to pay for the mortgage. Oh, I was house hacking before house hacking was cool. I figured out that renting out rooms would help pay your mortgage, but you are then responsible for other people and all that comes with it. I just learned as I went. It wasn't like a full-fledged plan. You don't have this plan. You just do something and it evolves into something else. So I was a landlord at 21 and some people moved out, I put new people in, and then for a very short time I was alone in the place. But that was very short-lived because I found it was so much better having someone else pay for your mortgage. So when I bought my second house, I ended up having tenants in those rooms as well. Like I was in my 20s, and I didn't want to just be living in a house by myself. And so having tenants, eventually they become friends and some don't and some move along. But it was just a fun experience to be in your 20s and working and hanging out with people, and it was a good time. In hindsight, I probably should have kept it. However, at the time I sold it because the house started to not work and I did well on the property. So the money that I made on that property, I was able to put forward to my next property, which was also a new build. So it was a good investment at the time because you buy a brand new property that's pre-construction. And then once it's built, I find that new builds, they grow in value much faster than a resale home, especially at that time. I mean, we're talking mid-2000s, so it was just a different time than it is now. So 2001 was $150,000, the refurbished one. The second one I bought was $220,000, but I'd made really good money off it, so it wasn't a matter of a minimum down payment. I think I had like 30% down payment from the money that I made off of the first property. And that house did me really well. It was a beautiful townhouse. I did learn that I didn't want an N unit because it was much colder. It was an older property, so I didn't really like the N unit, but I did like the extra lighting in the windows. So things you learn as you buy and sell real estate, right? But buying a new construction, it's amazing when it comes to growing equity quickly. However, you have to be prepared for eavesdrops and landscaping and, and all of those little air conditioning. Air conditioning didn't come standard in that property. So I had to buy an air conditioner, which doesn't seem like a big deal, but I didn't buy it when I bought the house. It could have been an upgrade. And in hindsight, just do the upgrades. Really what happens is the upgrades are tied into an amortized mortgage. It's pennies in the mortgage payment, but it was, again, lessons that you learn when you buy and sell real estate. So then I had been there for, I want to say at least 5 years. And then I met a boy and he's a wonderful, wonderful boy. And I ended up moving in with him. So I rented out my place fully. So I feel that's where I really became a landlord, because before that, renting out rooms in your 20s, you're just kind of hanging out with friends. And even though it wasn't really people I knew, it was not in the business mindset that I have now as a landlord. So rented out my place and I rented out to some really great tenants. I've been so lucky, I've had amazing tenants. And I know it's hard to find tenants and I know it's hard to think you're always gonna have a good tenant, but there are more good people than bad. I believe that. So I had good tenants. So I moved out, lived with him and had that property for another few years. And then it just got to be too much to manage, and I wasn't prepared to have a property manager, so I was doing it myself. So I decided to sell that property, and at this point I am a mortgage agent, because when Corey and I met, I became a mortgage agent probably within 6 months of us meeting. I had my property for a couple years. I ended up selling it. Then I started looking around, and we found a really great bungalow with a finished basement. And so that's how I bought my first 2-unit. And I've had that one ever since, and that's actually where I live now. Because fast forward, pandemic, someone left, it was vacant, we needed a place to live, and that's where we ended up moving into. I have owned in that time, I've bought and sold probably about 7 properties. At my height, I had about 6 doors, including the one I lived in. And I actually just recently sold my last property only because, so I've done all the cash damming, I've done all the rental, I've done all the investing, but I've been doing it for 25 years. And I felt that the last property I had was just something that wouldn't allow me to grow because financially it was gonna hold me back. We also went broke in the meantime, right? So when you see a life where you have this like glamorous extension, you always have to ask yourself, what do you not know? And what you don't know most of the time is that it was actually a struggle. It wasn't a success story. But I believe that adversity creates opportunity, and you have to be able to pivot, and you have to be able to allow yourself to make mistakes. And if you do, and you're okay with yourself when you make mistakes, and you're kind to yourself, because being nice to yourself is probably the best advice I can give anybody, it tends to work out. You just have to know that the journey you take is not the one that was intended. The end result will be what you want, but just how you got there is probably not how you expected it to get there.